fund based in Hong Kong called Old Peak.
Just here is a hedge on tin.
Old Peak selling has been a bit of a meme amongst the tin baron crowd. The big concern that a lot of people in the market have is that those shareholders aren't actually going to be the beneficiaries of this cash accumulation, right? They've just been hoarding it. Why is Metals.x, this new clean tin play, investing in a gold company in the Northern Territory? What is the angle here?
Why is Metals.x in Tanami?
Well, that's the question, right?
That is what I want to know. All right, g'day, money miners. 27th of June, nearing tax return time. How exciting. Jeez, I'm looking forward to that, boys. I won't lie.
There's a theme, isn't there, of a lot of tax loss selling happening in the market, Matty. A lot of
One right here, brother.
There's a lot of overhang on the juniors.
Oh, I know.
And no liquidity either, so it's a bit of a tough one if you're a bloody a junior out there.
Anyway,
Matty, by next year you'll be the one sweeping up all those bargains at tax loss selling. Don't you worry, mate.
Oh, I look forward to that day, JD. What's the temperature in Melbourne at the moment, Cobar?
Mate, not too different from Perth. I think it was 13 or 14 today. Pretty beautiful. Drizzly, classic Melbourne.
Well, there we go, boys. We're getting into tin today. Now, this is a bit different. We're not going back in history to like Cornwall or anything in the early tin boom. We're talking about modern tin. Talk about something.
Wizard of Oz, mate.
Something, as TJ said about lead, it ain't sexy at all, tin.
Oh, JD's got a different view. I reckon he's going to spruce it up.
Is tin getting some sex back into it, JD?
I think we've only just scratched the surface today. I mean, there's all these so-called tin barons on Twitter who I think we're going to talk to today, and it's got quite a following. But just scratching the surface this morning, doing the research, it's super, super interesting. So I think there might be room for a longer form chat later on, but we'll see how we go and see if there's any interest in what we do today.
I'm very much looking forward to what you two are going to pump out here today. This is I listen back to a lot of the episodes and think, oh shit, I actually learn a lot. But that's what everyone's getting. Like the service we're providing is sense. I didn't have to start this podcast to learn. I could have just listened to you two. So,
but mate, no one's learning as much as JD and I.
Right, boys, we'll get into it now. We'll go through the early news of everything else, and then we're going deep into tin and Metals.x. So we've got a bit coming out of AngloGold, Challenger Gold, BCI, a bit of salt industrial minerals to keep Trav's love for it alive.
Thank you, mate.
No worries. Vulcan, can't have an episode without lithium. And we're heading out to Cobar, north and south, talking about Polymetals in Kingston. So first up, lads. Now, I guess everyone head back and listen to the Parenti DDH1 takeover coverage yesterday. Boys did a good job. We did have a bit of mail come in from a person, shall remain anonymous, something we probably glossed over, talking about the synergies between the business, and the big one is the tax synergies, because Parenti they run at a tax loss because the debt's linked to the Australian business. So by bringing DDH1 into the business, they're effectively bringing in revenue tax-free, because they've got, I think, like $500 million of carried forward tax losses. So until they get chewed up, it's a good tax synergy to bring DDH1 in. So anything else you reckon? Any other feedback you got, boys?
I got some feedback that your word on the decline's not too far away, mate. So,
really?
I don't know. It's bloody conjecture, but I don't know.
So, but it wasn't the fact that it wasn't stupid. Like there is, I told you, boys.
You're not quite left field. You're more shortstop. So well done, mate.
We could do this. Could be a good end of the year episode. Matty's left field word on the declines and which ones actually came true. Right, let's get into it, boy. AngloGold, they announced plans to build a renewable energy facility, you'd say, at Tropicana. So they're looking to halve gas usage to meet their emission targets. Boys, what's happening here? Everyone's joining the party for a big renewable energy hub at their mine. Ain't the first.
Exactly, Matty. I mean, they've got these targets. AngloGold's obviously quite a big company, and they've got emissions targets, Scope 1 and Scope 2, that they need to meet at certain points in time. So they've entered into an agreement with Pacific Energy, and these guys are going to construct and operate the energy sort of capacity that they build out there. It's going to be wind and solar, and it's going to work in conjunction with what they're currently using, which is gas. So just the line, there weren't any actual cash figures announced when it came out. It's just a 2-pager. But there was a quote that says the capital cost of constructing the renewables infrastructure will be incorporated into the ongoing power costs charged to the Tropicana JV partners. So that's obviously
Regis.
Of course. The project is designed to maximise the emissions reduction while maintaining power costs at current levels. So it'll be interesting to see over the life of it if they do flesh out anymore, or if those power costs still maintain that level with Regis, the 30% holder there as well.
Yeah, mate.
They'll have a lot going into. I think I would assume the mill is one of the biggest consumers of power, but then they've got Boston Shaker there with underground, so your ventilation is your biggest consumer of power there. So that's where they'll see a lot of the benefit feeding renewable into the underground power as well. I don't think you get much out of the open pit.
Yep. And these guys, they just enacted their delisting, I believe, off ASX. So they've consolidated that one now. So I wonder if that maybe preempts a bigger deal.
Bigger deal.
Let's see.
Let's get on to Trav's. Oh, mate. We've got
salt.
What's Jay? So you're like mineral sands, salt, heavy, like industrial minerals.
Sometimes
what's JD's?
Oh, it's a good one.
Africa? No.
Yeah. What is your
What is your niche? What is your niche?
You guys have to tell me what I'm talking about too much.
Yeah, I don't know. You're just very diverse.
I reckon he ventures a little bit into like the less company specific stuff. Sometimes more broader thematic. Loves a bit of macro.
Yeah.
Loves the bigger picture kind of themes, like how regulation plays in, all that, all that sort of stuff. Which
I wouldn't fight you on that, Trav.
And I'm PNG and Menzies. Right. Now, based on this as a Japanese company, I'd say BCI salt offtake with Itochu.
Yep, Itochu. Yeah,
Itochu.
Yeah, that's a pretty brief one here, Matty. They've entered an offtake with Itochu. It's and they're one of Japan's trading and investment companies. It's pretty big. But the salt offtake is not pretty big. It's quite small. It's only for 3.6 thousand tonnes over a total of 5 years. And given that BCI is building Mardi, which is designed to produce 5 million tonnes per annum of salt, there's still a way to go there, but it's a step in the right direction.
Very good. Challenger Gold. Never heard. I've heard of the Challenger Gold mine, but I've never heard of Challenger Gold. What's happening here, lads? JD.
Matty, I can't say I've heard of it until this morning either. But what we all sort of do, we check what directors and management are buying and selling. So for a bit of scope, this company's capped at 115 million. They came out with a resource estimate. They've got a project in Ecuador. So it's called El Guayabo. That was about 10 or so days ago that they came out with that resource estimate. And they also had a $10 million placement. The stock's been whacked pretty hard. So they're down 60% since then, trading roughly 10 cents. But what stood out was that one of the directors, the non-exec chair, bought a bit over 110 grand worth of stock. But probably worth also mentioning that looking into the top 20 register, now these registers can be, pretty notorious for their accuracy, but it did look like a lot of the directors hold quite a large chunk of stock in that company.
Very good. A lot we like to see. Directors with skin in the game.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Usually.
mate.
Skin in the game in Ecuador.
Yes. Right. Vulcan and SLB. So Vulcan, now this is the lithium company that we omitted to say that Gina had dipped her toe into back in the day. Gina and the family, wasn't it?
Her son first, and she followed.
And she followed.
So also pulled out too.
Yeah. No, so this wasn't was it Hawthorne and Legacy? They weren't the first lithium one that Gina's dipped a toe into. So look, Vulcan
first hard rock
and
lithium.
Yes. So SLB, so that formerly Schlumberger, I'm pretty sure I know that's correct.
You said that right, mate.
Because I was at DeGrusse and they were sourcing pumps for the underground pump station from Schlumberger.
I love when everyone reads this one the first time. It's like Schlumberger?
Schlumberger. Right, what's going on here?
So SLB, you mentioned you'd sort of heard of them. They're quite a behemoth. They're like $67 billion company, and that's US dollars.
Wow.
So they've got the expertise in the geothermal sort of space. And I think that's what Vulcan are going to try and, utilize. They're obviously trying to extract lithium from down deep at their project in Germany. So one of the dot points just said really that SLB will provide tech services for 3.6 million US in kind to really just optimize Vulcan's efforts. And they'll also be executing a minimum of 15 production and injection wells. So it's not just the one way like in an oil well, but the pumping has got to go up and down for Vulcan's project to work.
Yeah, and this is to help with the production of what the company claims will produce renewable heat and lithium-bearing brine. Maddie?
Where's this one? Where's Vulcan located again?
It's Germany, Rhine.
Germany.
That's Germany.
Rhine Valley,
Yeah. So is there, and there's brine in Germany, hey? Not as much as in Argentina, but it's one of them.
Down deep, Maddie. Don't think of the big salt flats like the Argentinian and Chilean and Bolivian companies. It's quite a different strategy what Vulcan is trying to execute.
You got to drill 3 kilometres into a river, which they haven't done yet.
Yeah, right. Sounds very interesting. So it's similar to oil in a way.
That's what Schlumberger's an oil services company, right? Yeah.
Right, Polly, let's head out to Cobar. I don't mind Cobar.
We've got a couple, mate.
Cobar Parks area now, because I reckon there's going to be a bit of action in there in the next couple of years. First one, Polymetals. So Polymetals they've got the Endeavour mine, so that's just north of Cobar. So they've signed a prepayment deal with UK trading firm Ocean Partners for $10 million. So that's lads, is this a prepayment facility for future sales? Is this how it's working?
Yeah, so as is in the name, Polymetals are producing from a polymetallic project. And
silver, lead, zinc, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So working capital and development capital is what this money will go to. We'll flash up on the screen what the sort of terms were, but the maximum loan term was 36 months that the company flagged, and an interest rate of so far, so we've referenced this a few times, that's roughly 5% plus 7%. So that roughly equates to like 12% interest rate. And then on the back of that, like less than an hour pre-trade today, they went into a trading halt for a capital raising. So just for reference, they were kept at like 37 million before all this happened this morning. So we'll see what the terms are afterward.
Was it a weird how they did it? Because they put the announcement out about the prepayment facility, then nearly an hour later, then they went into a trading halt pending the capital raise.
Was that before market opened though?
Yeah, it was before, but it was just
before.
the order the announcements went up.
Yeah.
The
interesting thing with these guys is I reckon it'll be interesting to see how much they raise, but the one question I'm sure every investor that gets pitched to participate in the raise will ask is what's going to happen come, I think it's like April next year, that their agreement when they acquire this from Toho that they would replace the environmental bond cash backing, which is currently Toho's cash, but they got to replace it with their cash next year, I think it is. So that's coming around in the not too distant future when they're also going to be capital hungry to start mining. So, investors will just want to know what's going on there, and what investors will want is probably for that to be kicked down the road before they actually have to worry about dipping into equity markets again. So, we'll see if they can arrange for delayed terms to that one for Toho, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, from the company's point of view as well, if they can show investors, that they'd wrapped up 10 million in financing, it's a little benefit to show the equity investors afterward. So that would have increased the odds, of a better capital raise. And I haven't dug too deep into it, but I'm not sure what sort of terms were around that loan that they're given and if they need to hold a certain cash balance or not. So it could sort of go both ways there.
It's $27 million cash backing from my memory. So when you look at the $37 million market cap there, you're going to have to add 27 plus the 10 now, so another 37 in debt to consider the EV, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right, Kingston, another one. So this is heading the other direction of Cobar. This is sort of southeast. So it's southeast of Aurelia's Hera mine. This is, I think it's actually, looking at the map, it looks closer to Parkes than it is to Cobar. So Kingston, they've got the Mineral Hill project. So they've just raised $6.5 million to go towards the restart of that. So down 20% straight to the placement price. Another polymetallic operation. So what struck your eye here, lads?
$6.5 million raising. So 5.5 was the cap raise and a 1 million SPP. So that goes to the existing shareholders. So I think you can see, flicking through their docs, that they had restart capital of 16 odd million. They're also capped at roughly 40. So similar in market cap terms to Polymetals before. And yeah, they've also just got this little gold producing thing, honestly pretty tiny, 1.7 thousand ounces of gold from a sort of tailings project, but making a tiny bit of money, so not negative.
And this company in not too distant future was focused on developing the Misima gold project in PNG, your neck of the woods, Matty, but getting anything done in PNG is pretty bloody tough.
Not too distant past.
And it wouldn't be worth too much either. Because who wants to buy? No one wants to buy anything in PNG.
No.
So you still see on the latest press they've still got that one, but I think the Cobar's now the focus. Hey.
Yeah, I'd be more keen to build something in Australia personally.
It was good. It was when you looked at their announcement. It was good to see. It showed all the mines in around that Cobar Parks area, and there's like a lot of little ones that you just don't know because we're not from there.
Manuka's another little one that we'll talk about one day too. There's a lot. Yeah.
Oh no, I would definitely do it. God, the Cobar series would be like the Leonora series. So
who's going to consolidate it, mate? That's what we need. We need a
bit of word on the decline.
Yeah. Feel free to submit some word on the decline, money minus.
Maybe we could do, buddy. That could be part of our fake fund, like fake trading and fake M&A, and see who comes through. Mate, as I said, I tipped one the other day at the gold series. I bet you it'll happen. I bet not say it. Can't give away my trade secrets. Right, let's get into tin, lads. Tin. It is correct. Tin. What you would consider a roof back in the day. Nothing like sleeping under a tin roof when it's pissing down rain. It is bloody beautiful. And look, I will ask, where has this come from? What has spurred the tin deep dive today, lads?
I reckon there's a couple of answers to that. One is the absolute intrigue I have when you see a Twitter community. So I think anytime I see a bunch of accounts on Twitter all rallying behind a common theme, and there's a bunch of these churches, right? The tin one is fascinating, mate. Is it
hashtag tin twit?
I don't know, to be honest.
I'm
sure they'll let us know.
Tin Barons, mate.
The tin Barons. Yeah.
It's in a few of the names as well.
Yeah, it's I think some of those names are a bit sarcastic, but some are real. Look, obviously the huge lithium crowd, right? But the tin one's interesting because there aren't too many natural companies to get behind. Like literally, there's on the ASX, one real tin company you can get behind, and that's why it's interesting to me because of the kind of concentration in interest in one company. And it's a company you probably haven't dug too deep into before, Maddie. But an announcement popped up today on our screens that reminded us of a little bit of a narrative that was made aware to us by one of the money miners on Friday, and I think it's a pretty cool story to tell. We're probably going to pose more questions than we answer it, but it's a good excuse to talk about tin and the interesting corporate dynamics of MetalsX in the process.
Well, MetalsX is actually, and you'll go over the background here, and it's something that was very familiar in underground mining because it was it MetalsX took over a Laser and Westgold come out of MetalsX, divested out of MetalsX.
We will go there, Matty. We will go there. So
it is it by far is not an uncommon thing. So, right, boys, take it away. You're going to start with the Tanami bit or the MetalsX?
Yeah, let's start at the top. So how this one came back into our sort of sphere was Tanami Gold. So they came out today and said they've announced a $15 million exploration budget. Now, that's with their JV partner, Northern Star, obviously at their Tanami project in the Northern Territory. And that sort of got us thinking about the register at Tanami, which we'll dig into much later on down the track. But the story sort of weaves its way into MetalsX, like you guys have kind of alluded to. And I think sort of listeners might have to bear with us a little bit, but it's a pretty fascinating story. So Trav, you dug into a bit of the corporate history, kind of tying into what Maddie said as well with Westgold. Why don't you just run through what's gone on there the last 10 years?
Fascinating company, right? MetalsX, ticker MLX. You can just look at their long-term price chart, and what you can see when you zoom out a little bit is it's gone down 95%, and then it nearly made all of that back up again. How many companies do you see go down 95%? And
St. Barbara, but before they went down 95% again. But they went down to 5 cents and went bloody the people that made money off that. So not many.
Exactly. If you go down 95%, you then have to 20x in order to get back to where you're it's just a preposterous thing to happen, especially in a capital hungry industry. So anyway, whenever I see a price chart like that, I just get so curious, right? And there's a fascinating history behind this company. It merged with Westgold in 2012, and then the two companies demerged again in 2016, and MetalsX relisted on the ASX when that happening. But I love another fascinating part of history. The merger and demerger.
They maintained the name MetalsX, didn't they?
I think it was just a subsidiary that delisted at the time beneath the Westgold headco, and then when it relisted, that subsidiary became MetalsX ticker again. Fascinating, right? And in recent history, though, Maddie, they've divested some of their non-core assets, which has made it a lot more appealing from a pure play tin exposure perspective. Their key asset now is this 50% interest in the Renison tin mine, which JD will talk more about. But that non-core assets that they've divested in recent history are Nifty, which we've talked about on the show before, complicated copper mine in WA.
It probably didn't need to be. The Aditya Birla just bloody absolutely ballsed it up.
Yeah, and this asset is responsible for eroding a lot of that shareholder value when you look at that decline share price chart on the MetalsX history. So they managed to sell Nifty in 2021 to Cyprium. And the other one that they divested is Winjalla, and that's a nickel cobalt laterite project in the middle of Australia, not too far from West Musgrave, that BHP is developing. They sold and spun that out into an ASX listed vehicle called Nico, which IPO'd in late 2021.
Oh, God, the capital markets fees and brokerage and everything with all these mergers and spin-outs, mate, keeps this whole industry alive, doesn't it?
The bank is never
Nothing
hungry,
is being created. It's all just flicking, transferring hands at owners.
Because investor memories are short. That's why we're here to remind them, mate.
Good work, boys. Now, JD, where does MetalX sit today as a company? What's it look like on the market?
Let's go over the financials a bit. So they're capped at 240 million. I think that's at about 26 cents. Now, they've got 115 million bucks in cash, which is...
That's a lot of cash, mate. Wow.
For a company of that size, crazy.
Is that from the sale of Nifty and Winjalla?
I think they had some great operating performance in recent history because tin boomed and they made a bunch of cash.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's a sort of mixture of things which we'll dive into a bit more. They've also got $7 million worth of Nico shares. So that was one of the companies they spun out. $36 million in Cyprium sort of con note type of things. So it will give them an EV. I'll say around 120 million. I think it's a bit debatable what those notes that they have in Cyprium are worth. I sort of noted that
zero given Cyprium's latest financing.
Exactly. So they came out with financing yesterday, which was not great, to sort of put it lightly. And like you kind of touched on, Trav, they've got 50% of the Renison tin mine in Tasmania. So
who's got the other 50%?
Yunnan, which is the biggest tin company in the world, Chinese group.
Okay, yep.
They sort of, Yunnan came in around the time that Nifty was in real trouble, and MetalsX as a company was in real trouble mid to late 2020. And they sort of helped out MetalsX with debts that they had and whatnot. So
in your calcs there, Jada, you got $118 million EV.
That's equating the notes at a $0 value.
Yeah.
So their only asset is 50% of the Renison tin mine. Is that right?
And obviously all of that cash.
And the cash and the shares in Nico.
Yeah.
And Cyprium.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the Cyprium con notes, but the only actual operation is the 50% of Renison.
They've got exploration tenements and whatnot, but not ascribing value to them at the moment. So
very interesting.
To give the money miners a bit of an idea of Renison and its sort of performance, I'll give a bit of a scope of the last rolling 12 months. This came from the latest quarterly. Now, bearing in mind they have 50%, so these numbers will be 100% of the mine. So 7.9 thousand tonnes of tin at an all-in cost of Aussie 34,000. Now, they realised selling that at a price of $39.6 thousand, and that means, $5.6 thousand of cash per tonne. And that's 40.
I think this is why at this very point is why I think it gets such a bit of a following, right? Because the punters love the highly leveraged producer, because as soon as the commodity price goes up, right, like it just, the
100% trap
is such a reflexive move, right? So if it's a high cost producer, there's only one bloody tin miner on the ASX.
And that's cash flow at these current levels of just over $22 million. That is 100% of the cash flow that Metals X would see. And just they're looking to get that production up to 10,000 tonnes per annum from the current 8 that I mentioned.
It's a pretty good price to cash flow ratio there.
So when's I think it's down, so what was it? End of 2021, there was a massive boom in tin by the looks.
Yeah, let's get into that,
come
Matty.
off substantially.
So, mate, I'll give a bit of scope on tin.
So that 12 months was obviously at the lower end of where the tin prices ended up. So 2021 would have been a lot more profitable, I assume.
Yeah, although 2021 was clearly an outlier of a year for that particular commodity price. So for
go into the macro for us, JD. Tell us a bit about tin, Cobar.
Mate, like I said at the beginning of the show, this is just sort of scratching the surface, but you can kind of think of tin like cobalt in the sense of not a heap of first world countries are producing it. There's a lot of, so-called third world countries. The DRC has a great tin mine. There's mines in South America. This asset, obviously Renison in Australia, is one of the few really great operating mines in the world. You obviously touched on there's quite a bit of history in England producing this sort of stuff, but that's all closed now. So a bit on the supply side, 50% of tin is used for solder in electronics, semiconductors and the like. And then you got 20%.
Critical mineral.
Sure is. And that critical mineral, it comes entirely from the fact that whichever particular country you're talking about there, Trav, they can't produce it in their country or their jurisdiction. So America say they're not going to list tin as a critical mineral if they can source heaps of it in America. So it's sort of derived from the fact that they can't source a lot of it in whichever particular country you're talking about. Now, on the sort of jurisdiction side, 30% produced in China, roughly 20% in Indonesia, roughly 15% in Myanmar, and the rest, like I said, South America, Africa, making that up. Now, this is where the sort of tin barons come into it, all these folks on Twitter, and why they're super sort of bullish. So I'm going to break down.
JD, I just had to Google it, and it's not on Australia's critical mineral list, so I'm going to have to protest this one. I'll let you continue now.
Well, I think, like I said, that would sort of be derived from that we can produce quite a bit of it here. Renison makes a decent amount of the world production. So looking into the different countries, if you, Matty, look at that price chart again and you see that huge boom at the beginning of 2021, that sort of coincided with the coup in Myanmar. And like I said, Myanmar produces 15% or so of the world's tin. Now, the WA junta, they claim that they're going to stop mining in August. Now, whether you actually believe that, you might have to take that with a pinch of salt. This brings in a good bit of money for them. So
WA junta, that's the Myanmar mine, is that right?
There's a few mines in the north of Myanmar, in the area that junta sort of controls, and they've said they're turn these off. So whether they're actually going to do it, whether they're saying it because they've got issues with the mines, who really knows? They're not any sort of Western companies there mining any of that. On the Indonesia,
switch it off. What's the rationale there?
But I'd have to dig in. For the money miners listening, we'll flick up an article. There's a Reuters article. They spoke about it. I'm not 100% sure of what the actual rationale behind it was. But if you then move across the sort of supply spectrum to Indonesia, so like I said, they're producing over 20% of tin. Now, they're doing a lot of this, we learned today, Trav, from sea mining. So to me, that sort of screams risky, high cost, and a whole other bunch of negative sort of connotations.
Most of sea mining's a pipe dream, but I think this is the artisanal stuff, which is doable.
It's doable, but, how doable is it on a massive scale? So I think that sort of speaks to the fact that their reserves have been depleting a bit. Now, just to wrap up that supply sort of story, you've also got China and this sort of narrative that there's going to be a huge stimulus and that's going to boost all commodities and, that's going to come from China. We've kind of been waiting on this for a while. Got to wait and see if that actually comes about. But like you guys sort of said at the top of the show, you got to remember these commodities are priced at the margin. So if a few of these get a whack and MLX is, highly leveraged to that commodity price, it could be quite beneficial.
So the thesis of the tin barons, JD, is that 10% of the world's supply is potentially going offline August 1st, as announced by this, state-owned entity in Myanmar. There might be some doubts on whether that or not actually happens or not, because in that particular region, it looks like the tin mining actually accounts for like over 50% of GDP. So it'd be hard to see how you could just flick off that economic switch.
And on the demand side, sorry, you go.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, but it does look like production out of that area has been decreasing a little bit, and maybe that is to do with reserves, not being of a high quality. We don't know. It's a bit opaque. Is that right? Yeah,
absolutely. And just to speak to the demand side, you hear a lot of these sort of tin barons say that tin is, non-substitutable and it's kind of inelastic. And what they sort of say is that the dollar spent on tin in electronics isn't actually a great amount. So there's no huge need to substitute it out. And as well as that, they sort of say that, like most substitutable things, there aren't too many great substitutes for the actual product. That's just a bit of backstory.
A small unit cost for the tin in whatever it goes into, so you just pay it.
Exactly. And we'll sort of, when we conclude, maybe give our kind of thoughts on these things. But I think that gives a bit of scope on what's going on in the tin market, and we should dig into what's going on at Metals.x, specifically on the corporate side of things. Right,
tie it together for me, JD and Trav. Where's this all link up to Metals.x?
I reckon we should dig into the sort of shareholder dynamics and why this sort of relates to Tanami and Metals.x and everything else.
And the Tanami link. This is like, I'm hanging on for this.
Oh, it all comes together.
Trav, I'll let you have the limelight, mate.
It's the shareholder dynamics that intrigue me, Matty. I love the shareholder dynamics. So let's talk about the shareholders of Metals.x, and let's keep in mind, like JD said, I think there's only two like Western listed tin miners you can really get good exposure to. Metals.x is one of them. It's cheap EV and highly leveraged to a tin boom. So if you buy the tin macro story, like JD talked about, you look here first most of the time.
And Alpha Min is a Canadian listed one. They're the other one you're referring to, Trav. Yeah. And they are Western listed, but they have their asset in the DRC.
Yeah. So let's look at the shareholders of Metals.x, Matty. I want to talk about a previous sort of major shareholder at Metals.x, and that is a fund based in Hong Kong called Old Peak. Now, Old Peak at one stage owned about 18% of Metals.x back in April 2021. Old Peak have, in recent history, been selling down their position pretty aggressively on market, so creating a bit of a drag on that share price, right? And their position is now down to about 8.7%. So it's come down a fair bit, and this is in their latest disclosures on ASX as at May this year. Now, Old Peak selling has been a bit of a meme amongst the tin baron crowd on Twitter, hasn't it, JD?
Mate, it sure has. We have to flash a few of them up on the YouTube. They're pretty hilarious, some of them.
So is this the respeculator one? I'll read her out. This is a Hong Kong hedge fund that runs special situations, not a long-term resource investor. They got in 2.5 years ago when the company was on the bones of its ass with a cost base sub 10 cents per share. These funds have own mandates, restrictions, and often time constraints. Spoken to management. What's he saying there?
So
I think he's just saying it's not a natural sort of long investor that you know maybe taking a long-term view. It's a hedgy.
Yeah.
So that sort of speaks to the dynamics going on there. The actual meme ones, Maddie, we've got a bit further down. We'll chuck them in the YouTube. They're pretty funny. I think it really just goes to show, with a illiquid name like this, with somebody who has a substantial position, almost 20%, it can take months and months and months for them to sell out.
Yeah. So now we've talked about Old Peak. We know who Old Peak is, and they've been selling. Well, who's been buying the stock, Maddie?
So before you start that, is the consensus that this Old Peak are here as a they're just here as a hedge on tin?
I think we're going to raise more questions than we can answer, Maddie. So bear with us here.
Okay, there's my question number one.
Yeah. So who's been buying Old Peak stock? It's another fund out of Hong Kong too.
Buying Old Peak or buying MLX?
Buying MLX, looks like off of
buying
the
stock.
One's selling on market, the other one's buying on market. It's sort of neutralising that selling pressure. The party that's been buying is APAC. And APAC is another fund out of Hong Kong, Maddie. I know, it gets juicy.
Oh, boys.
These guys are a resources fund and they do have links to Australia as well.
They do. APAC, they're sitting there with a 20.82% shareholding in MLX. You might be wondering, how do they get over 20 without the change of control? Well, ASX allows this creep provision. You can accumulate up to 3% within a 6-month period and you don't trigger that rule. So they're at 20.8% now, right? And APAC have such a fascinating history with this company and some really curious stuff going on here, Maddie. So bear with us.
Oh.
But for now, what you got to know is that APAC's deputy chairman is a guy by the name of Brett Smith. Now, Brett Smith is a name that we should remember because he's also a non-executive director at Tanami Gold, where we started with the story.
Here we go. Now we're talking.
Remember Nico, the spin out of MLX that we talked about before? So Brett Smith, he's also a non-executive director there too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So what is the thing that really caught our eye? Now, Maddie, to be clear, it caught one of the money miners' eyes who made it aware to our eye. Well, APAC recently lobbed a change of substantial notice on Tanami Gold. That's right. They're a substantial shareholder there too. APAC owns Tanami Gold. They own MLX. So they're bullish on both.
They own a big chunk of Tanami, don't they?
A big chunk, mate. They're now up to 49.23% there. That's nearly half of it. So, however, the mechanism by which they have some of that interest is actually the fascinating bit to me. When you look at that recent change of substantial notice that they lodged with ASX, you see that some of the recent growth in that number is a result of an indirect interest via MLX. That's right. MLX has been buying shares in Tanami Gold.
Yeah, right. So, talk me through that again. So, APAC have, how are they linked to, how's MLX and APAC?
Because MLX has been buying shares in Tanami, and APAC is a big shareholder in MLX.
Yeah, because APAC have over 20% now.
Effectively,
they've got
even without
relevant
APAC
interest by the definition of the Corporations Act.
And so when they put out a shareholder notice, they link their percentage in another company and add it to the.
It has to be linked.
The aggregate.
Yeah.
I get you now.
Correct.
And that goes to show, if you just Google top 20 shareholders and sort of see what you get, for a lot of companies, it might not necessarily be accurate because of funky stuff like this.
Because it doesn't aggregate at all. Whereas, but if you go to the those services where I think the MDs have, they get the aggregated shareholding of one person.
The company
from all their interests.
Yeah, the company. That is another thing about the Corporations Act that we learned by doing this show is when you ask a company, you can ask a company for their shareholders list as well, by the way. It's part of a provision of one of the Corporations Acts. So I don't know if they always have to give it to you, but sometimes they'll drag their feet on that one. But you can ask.
There you go. Okay, so why
Why is this interesting?
Why is MetalsX in Tanami?
Well, that's the question, right?
That is what I want to know.
So let's first ask the question: how many shares? We can see how many shares. MetalsX have bought 34.4 million shares in Tanami Gold, which is only about $1.4 million worth at current prices, or about 3% of the shares on issue in Tanami Gold, ticker TAM. And why are we fascinated by this, Matty? Firstly, why is MetalsX, this new clean tin play, investing in a gold company in the Northern Territory? What is the angle here, right? Secondly, clearly APAC, this Hong Kong fund, is long both MetalsX and Tanami Gold. So it seems a bit convoluted in that sense. And thirdly, MetalsX has so much cash, and the big concern that a lot of people in the market have is that those shareholders aren't actually going to be the beneficiaries of this cash accumulation, right? They've just been hoarding it, which is an unusual thing for a company to do if they don't show you what their plans are to do with that cash. And now what you're seeing them do with that cash is buying, bloody interest in a gold company in the Northern Territory. It makes no sense. So
that Northern Star divested out of, didn't they?
Because they got a JV there.
Yeah. Do they still have the JV?
No, I think they might still have the JV, but
yeah,
of course,
do.
Black Cat bought the mine there.
Yeah. But there was the...
They recognised the JV in the announcement today.
Yeah. Fascinating, right? So there's a couple other things that make this whole story even more curious. Remember Old Peak, Matty, the big shareholder that has been selling down? Well, Old Peak actually own about 11% of APAC.
Oh, Jesus
The two
Christ.
Hong Kong funds have a relationship.
God, this is like bloody... This is like 24, like Jack Bauer, like every end of every episode. It's like boom, boom. Oh. So they are, right. So now does Old Peak doesn't, they don't own any of, do they own any of Tanami? They just own Tanami through APAC.
I think just through APAC. Okay, there's one more thing, Matty.
Oh, God.
And that is
I'm hanging on here.
APAC. They have a pretty colourful history, as I alluded to, in their corporate dealings with the Metal X management. When you troll through the announcements, you'll actually see that APAC in the past issued a 249D.
Oh, these are cool.
Oh, we love the 249D in June 2020, and they were proposing to replace 3 of the board directors there at
So
Metals
what's
X.
boys, just quick definition on a 249D?
249D is the provision in the Corporations Act that basically, it's an attempt to remove board directors, and then it goes to a shareholder vote. So
it gives shareholders the power to enact to remove the board.
Yeah, when they think the board's not acting in shareholders' interests, which they had concerns about. So that was in June 2020. On the 10th of July, we see that APAC were successful, Matty. They got 2 of those directors to stand down from the board. APAC introduced 2 directors of their own that they had nominated, Graham White and Peter Gunsberg, to join the board then. And at the same time, Brett Smith, yes, that Brett Smith.
So he's the Nico.
APAC guy. Yeah,
Nico,
he's on the boards. Yeah. Brett Smith, the deputy chairperson of APAC, he becomes executive director at MetalsX as well. And the 249D was withdrawn because they've agreed to these changes.
They got rid of the 3 directors. Yep.
Yeah. So, and then at the AGM that came in November that year, in 2020, the new director successfully had another board incumbent, Simon Bao, removed from the board too. So that left the MetalsX board with 4 people, 3 of which were direct nominations of APAC. And I find that whole piece fascinating because, now the story that JD and I are telling is like they're hoarding cash and they're allocating that cash to this thing that looks a bit, might be in the best interest of APAC, but is it in the best interest of the other shareholders? We don't know, right? So there's like question marks on the ability to do what's right for the other shareholders. And that was the reason that APAC got involved in the 249D process in the first place, because they thought the management weren't acting in their interest. So what a fascinating story.
I look forward to re-listening to all of this. Okay, so tell me when you want to get to what is the play here. I don't like MetalsX have got all this cash. They've got investment interest from these Hong Kong, decreasing interest from one Hong Kong hedge fund, but now interest from another new Hong Kong fund, and they've got this cash and they've got interest in Tanami as well as leverage too, possibly appreciating tin price if it does happen.
I reckon let's just weigh up some sort of pros and cons and see if what we can kind of get to, because I think if you are long tin or interested in tin, it obviously makes sense to have some sort of interest in MetalsX. So on the pros side of things, like you sort of said, I'm thinking they've got a huge pile of cash. They're doing pretty well at the tin prices we're seeing already. So that's a good sort of sign. And then on the corporate side of things, they, you know, up until kind of recently, looked like they'd really cleaned up things, getting rid of Nifty, getting rid of Nico. They looked like they'd really become that sort of purely tin-focused player. And then on the negative side of things, are we sort of seeing strategy kind of drag? You know, are they sort of putting that money that perhaps should go to shareholders towards, you know, other interests?
Well, one example they could have done with that cash, right, is just buy back their stock. They could do it off market and they would sap up all of that selling pressure from Old Peak. Like, what an accretive thing to do. You know, Old Peak have been selling down. You just buy the shares off of them. Great. And instead, what are they doing? They're buying shares in Tanami Gold. Makes no sense.
Are they looking to get, do you think they're looking to get back into gold?
Mate, I doubt it.
With that cash, because if you've got that much cash and you're just in tin, you can't do much with it. You can't just go buy more tin mines, can you?
I think the real, you should just be delivering it to shareholders, you know?
But what do they do after that?
You bloody the purpose of a mine is to make money and give it to shareholders. You don't just bloody burn it.
But then tin looks like it could just go to shit anyway.
No, it's a tin play. Be a tin company.
Well, that kind of speaks to one of the other cons that I had, is that like management for a long time, you know, there was a big sort of question mark, you know, where's their focus? Are they doing, you know, this right? They, you know, had Nifty, they got all these other things. So it was a great thing to see them really get focused and deliver that strategy. Like, should we have to get cautious on what management are going to do in the future? That, you know,
I think you have to question whose intentions are being, you know, thought of in these corporate actions. Yeah, is it the interest of all shareholders, or is it the interest of their major shareholder?
Yeah, so that obviously beats around the bush of one of the cons potentially being, what are they going to do with all that cash? You know, I don't think they've paid a dividend in like 6 odd years. So yeah, the other sort of con that you could potentially see would be, like you kind of said there, Maddie, if we do see a recession, tin is going to get whacked, and that would be pretty detrimental for the company.
Stay tuned, eh?
I think we pose more questions than we answer, right? And I think like we probably got a bunch of shit wrong too. So the tin barons, please feel free to correct us. And we're curious in this one.
Fascinating sort of commodity, hey?
Good dive, lads. I'm looking forward to re-listening to that. That was I can't keep up with you when you're talking. I need the ability to rewind. Yeah. So right, JD, you be okay. So I can't. My attendance tomorrow not guaranteed.
Is there another State of Origin game, mate? What the hell?
I got my New South Wales little fundy friend coming over. I can't name his name because he's like real important these days because he works for he's on the 47th floor of a building. So I'm surprised he's even letting me catch up with him for a beer. So
you have friends on the 47th floor, mate.
Oh, mate, he doesn't let me go up there.
They don't even have 47 floors in Perth.
No, not at the Gateway building in Sydney. It's near Circular Quay. Right.
Love it.
Boys.
Hootaroo, lads.
Did we have any messages to the fans? Oh, if anyone's for people asking and messaging me about the Hootaroo chat, you've got to join the Facebook group Money Miners first, and then that gives you the chat. So you got to join, and the link to the Money Miners private group is in the episode description. So go there. Stop bloody messaging me. Did we get to 2,000 views yet? 2,000 subscribers on YouTube yet?
We must be close.
Fucking here we go. Live check. 1989. Son of a bitch.
Let's get it up there.
Mate, by this evening, we'll be there.
Come on, get us on, lift them YouTube subscribers for us, everyone. The boys and me, but mostly the boys, put a lot of effort into making these YouTube videos look very flash with pictures and everything. So give the channel a follow. And if you want to skip to a certain story, they're also chaptered. So if you like a look of a certain topic, you can go straight there. So
and if you really support us, post our videos in Hot Copper because we keep getting banned every time we do it.
I don't, because I'm not doing it, Trav. Matt Michael is not posting in Hot Copper, but yeah, you Trav and JD haven't had much luck in Hot Copper.
Beautiful. Hootaroo.
Hootaroo, Money Miners.
Hootaroo.
The information contained in this episode of Money of Mine is of general nature only and does not take into account the objectives, financial situation or needs of any particular person. Before making any investment decision, you should consult with your financial advisor and consider how appropriate the advice is to your objectives, financial situation and needs.